Welcome to another episode of The Horrific Podcast. We're two musicians who used to play in a band together and share a passion for scary movies. Each week we pick a different horror movie and dissect it to figure out what it was trying to accomplish, how well it did, and maybe even some larger truths about why people watch horror movies in the first place. If you haven't seen the movie we're talking about, then don't worry. The first half of the episode will be pretty high level and spoiler free, and then we'll play a warning before we start talking about any major plot twists in the ending. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy the episode. So I know we did this kind of out of order. We had originally planned to start the year with the movie The Haunting, but we ended up doing Bird Box instead just because it was super popular and people were talking about it. But we're kind of back to business now, and this week we watched The Haunting because we wrapped up our series on The Haunting of Hill House, which was based on the same book at the end of last year. And I was just kind of curious, like, what did you expect this movie to be going into it? Did you expect it to be really similar to the series, or what did you think it would have?
Well, so basing it off of the, like, kind of the facts that I read about it, like, I knew it was different. I actually think I was thinking it was more like the book, even though I hadn't technically read the book. Yeah. But I thought it was more like the book.
Which I haven't read the book yet, but you got it for me for Christmas, so I will be doing that soon, and I'm pretty excited. But I really didn't know what to expect as far as, you know, I knew that they had added a couple characters for the series, and that the character Shirley was named after Shirley Jackson, the author. But beyond that, I didn't really know what to expect. I thought there would be a lot more similarity than there was. So on the one hand, I was kind of excited that it was different just because it's like new content. Right. But on the other hand, I really liked the series, so it was almost like the movie couldn't live up to that.
Yes. Yeah. I'm gonna think we'll get a little bit more into that here pretty soon. But I felt the same way. It was, you know, I like my old movies, but I think if we had watched this before the series, it would have been maybe a different outcome. Yeah, or my opinion might have been a little bit different. Yeah, but you know.
Well, and it was a little confusing because a lot of the characters were named the same, but like their role was completely different. Yeah. And we'll definitely get into this more after the spoiler warning, but like there was a Theo and a Luke and an Eleanor, but they weren't related to each other and they didn't have any direct connection to the Crane family. And then Abigail was a character, but she had passed away before like Crane. And she was gone, you know, even before like the main part of the story started. So that was interesting to me, but the one exception then I guess would be that the Dudleys were pretty similar. Yeah. And so they continue their tradition of being the oddball of the series. Right. So and you know, the thing with, you know, they didn't have much screen time after, you know, the beginning. So it was just like they were kind of a like afterthought. I mean, they were brought up a few times, but it was definitely different than I expected. Yeah. And I thought it was funny because, like, Mr. Dudley had the most West Virginia accent I've heard since Randy Moss. That was so rough.
Yeah, I know, man.
But anyway. Yeah,
I love it.
But yeah, beyond that, there were a ton of scenes that the series references, though, so I like that a lot, and we'll get into that more. But yeah, let's get this started.
Let's do it.
While doing our series on The Haunting of Hill House, we learned a lot about it in the book that it was based on, as well as other things that the book had inspired. One of those was the 1963 movie called The Haunting. Like The Haunting of Hill House, The Haunting was based on a novel by Shirley Jackson and was centered around an evil house with a dark past that drove people inside it crazy. The story touches briefly on the history of the house and then focuses on a group of paranormal researchers who stay in the house to investigate the strange goings-on. This movie was released in 1963 in England and made just over $1 million at the box office, which was slightly less than the budget for making it. You can currently rent The Haunting for streaming on YouTube. It wasn't able to be rented on Amazon, though.
It was on iTunes, though.
Oh, nice.
Yep.
So I know you're probably in kind of a tight spot on learning things about this movie because you did a lot of the reading, a lot of facts that had to do with it when we were doing this series. But did you find anything interesting?
Yeah, I got a couple things. One was actually that I used during the series, but
that's fine.
You know, whatever. So the exterior shots of the location of the house was actually filmed in Warwickshire, which is, I guess, in England. It's the Eddington Park Hotel. That was used for the exterior shots. And supposedly, it's actually haunted.
Oh, really?
That's what they say.
We'll have to go there someday.
Yeah, that'd be fun, except for I don't leave the United States. Or Oklahoma.
Yeah.
So, Julie Harris, she played Eleanor. Mm-hmm. And she was very, like standoffish to the cast. She was being like that to try to help the acting, like to stay in character almost. So like, but what she kind of goes through, it kind of helps out. She thought it would kind of help out the acting, but apparently it kind of almost hurt Claire Bloom, who played Theo's, feelings.
Oh, yeah. Like
so much that like she kind of, I think she took her like a gift after as like a, let's try to make up and be friends kind of thing, and they immediately hit off, and Julie was like, no, she's like, no, I was basically trying to be isolated, like it was self-imposed because I'm trying to help out with the characters and all this. So I thought that was kind of interesting, though. I mean, you always hear method acting, and it's like, I guess she couldn't have said anything because it would have changed, how they felt towards each other. But as Eleanor goes through the movie, you start to realize why, the whole self-imposed.
So would you say that the actress was being John Malkovich?
She was being John Malkovich. Yes, she was. Here's another thing. The script originally had a scene where Theo was moving out of her girlfriend's house.
Oh, really?
They were breaking up. Uh-huh. But it was cut because it was 1963 and that kind of stuff didn't fly. Here it says that she had just broken it off with female lover. I Hate You was written on a mirror, and Theo is yelling at her ex-lover through out the window, cursing, which was probably like saying I hate you back in 1963. But anyways, that had to be cut. I just thought it was kind of interesting because the Theo character of the TV show was very homosexual. Yeah.
So that was like something that came up more than once in the series. I mean, that was just kind of part of what her character was. Yeah. And it's interesting how different things are now.
Okay. Another fact is a lot of the filming was shot through a special lens that had like curvature on it, so it looked like the house was almost like bending.
Yes.
I guess, and that was done on purpose. Mm-hmm. Make things seem weird, which I think it accomplished pretty well. Yeah. I couldn't have told you that it was done with a lens until I read that. But all right, here is the last fact that I told you in the series. But Russ Tamblyn, he was the uncredited cameo of Nell's psychiatrist in the TV show, and Russ Tamblyn played Luke. In this movie. Yeah. So Luke's character in this movie, Russ Tamblyn, was the psychiatrist to Nell in the TV show.
Gotcha. I would not have picked up on that. I know you said it back at the time, but I'd forgotten by the time we watched this.
Yeah, and after I read that, because I'd forgot about it by now. After I read that, I was like, oh yeah, okay, that makes total sense. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. So anyway, I thought that was pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And again, I think this movie is a lot more interesting because we have the context, we know a lot more about kind of the modern stuff, and hopefully the people listening feel the same way. But yeah, so I guess as far as what the people who made the movie were trying to do and how well they did it, I feel like they really wanted to be Alfred Hitchcock.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like everyone involved with making this movie saw Psycho in 1960 and loved it, and they're like, we can do that. So it had a very similar vibe. It was also in black and white. There were lots of shadows, kind of to set the mood. But one difference for me was the music. Like, there were... Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, you go.
Oh, I was just going to say, there were a couple of scenes where it just really didn't fit. Like, you'd expect to see little kids playing in a park or something based on the music, but that wasn't at all what was happening in the scene. So it definitely did not hit on that level for me.
Well, I mean, even the story itself, like, kind of, starts off the same, something being stolen, running away, like driving the car, just the way it was shot,
and the way the camera's like on her face while she's driving, and you're hearing like her inner monologue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it was definitely I thought the exact same thing. I was like, okay, well, not only are modern movies influenced by him, but
yeah,
because of that era.
Yeah, it didn't take long at all.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think in overall the way the movie was made, like, it was fine. There wasn't anything that really stood out to me a lot as being especially creative. They kind of went with like a known motif, and that works for the type of movie it was trying to be, with the one exception of, just kind of the music didn't really fit a few times.
Yeah.
But something that stood out to me a lot more about this movie is the acting. And I think that one reason that it did, or that it stood out to me more, was just because the way the story was and the way that they set up the movie. Obviously it wasn't really heavy on special effects. It wasn't a 2018 thing with a high budget where they could have a lot of computer animation or a lot of trick photography or anything. It was just a lot of like focusing on people's faces and dialogue. Mm-hmm. And overall, I thought the acting was pretty good, with one notable exception, which was Eleanor. Because I felt like she was completely bipolar. It was like, I know that the ultimate goal, what they were doing for the ultimate goal for the ending, but yes, I couldn't agree with that anymore. Like, it was just like all of a sudden she was just like, she was just like happy, and then she was like freaking out on Theo, and it was just it was strange. Even I guess at the beginning, before she was at the house, when she's there with her sister and sister's husband. Yeah, she's like, what the heck's going on here? Like, this is strange. Like, and first off, if you rent a room for me, you can't kick me out of that. I own this house. Like, I'll kick you out of it. Yeah. Yeah, it was weird. It was really weird. And she's like, well, I paid for half that car, so I'm entitled to steal it. Like, what? Yeah. Yeah. It was really weird. It's all for not getting the title in your name. Yeah. And then in the house, it, I guess, made a little bit more sense just in terms of the story. But it was like, one minute she was just so happy to be there and like sucking up to that doctor so hard. Yeah. And then the next minute she'd be like, I hate all of you. I'm going on my own. And it's right. Like, because in a movie like this, you have to play off of like the emotions of the cast to really know, like, to set the scene and to know how you're supposed to feel and to know what the vibe is. And she was just so all over the place that it was really hard to lock in and even know, like, were they trying to be funny there, or is this meant to be dramatic, or am I supposed to feel suspense for the character? Like, it was just a kind of weird thing. Well, and it was, for me, it was also a little frustrating because I felt like the character development for her was really strange. Like, they, she was talking about her bad relationship with her mom, and then she was talking about her apartment that she has, and she's just getting stuff, but like, you don't know otherwise that I don't know, it just seemed there were a lot of strange things. It's like, if I have no feelings or attachment to any of those characters, like, if any of them died, it would have been like, but I don't know, it was just strange, I guess, for me, like the development, like it didn't make sense for it. Not that you have to have it, but yeah, but I think you're onto something there by saying that you didn't feel a strong connection to any of the characters, because that's, in a suspenseful movie or a psychological horror movie, that's an important thing to have to keep you interested, and if it's not established, it's kind of hard. Right, and when you don't have that special effects like we do now, and, to make a horror film the way that it is, like, I feel like you're technically, they were relying on 4 characters. Yeah. And I don't know. It just seemed a little rushed, I guess, even though the movie is 2 hours long. Yeah. Yeah, I think the house got more backstory than any of the characters. Right. But all that said, I did really love Theo's character. She was probably my favorite from the series. And so I was really happy to see that she had kind of the same, I guess, attitude in this one. She was kind of a smartass and kind of a troll. And I liked that she was wearing the gloves when she first walked in. And, the fact that she had the, at least some lightweight psychic abilities still. I thought was kind of cool. So she was the most interesting part of the movie to me as far as the characters go, and I really liked her, but she didn't get nearly as much focus as Eleanor, who again, wasn't as sympathetic. So yeah.
And Luke's character was kind of confusing for me.
Yeah,
it was just like he just showed up, and then next thing you know, he's talking about selling the house, and like I don't know, it was strange.
Yeah, so I guess the woman who had inherited the house, he was her son or nephew or something, and he was going to end up with the house, and so the premise was that he was going to kind of check it out and evaluate his future earnings from selling it. And so he was very like aloof and very not interested in the investigation or anything like that. And so he was kind of a little bit of a background character. But he also added a little bit of humor to it. So that's very good background character. It's very good, because at times it's just like, shut up, man, you're in the way. But so how do you think that this movie was trying to be scary? Well, I think they were definitely going for the more psychological and suspenseful angle, but I don't think they pulled it off super well. Like, there were lots of the big open shots of the house with a lot of stuff in the background and like lots of mirrors reflecting other mirrors, and there were lots of places to look around, because we talk about with Paranormal Activity how the whole movie you're just scanning the background looking for something that's going to be moving or a shadow or something. And in this one, I didn't feel like anything ever happened. So you very quickly learned that there was no payoff to looking at the background, but it would have been really easy to put something in, and it just didn't happen. So it wasn't that same level of, I feel like I'm very much required to watch every background movement. It was just like, they're just there talking.
Right.
And even when there was paranormal activity going on, there really wasn't that much happening visually. Like, I feel like they tried to rely on the audio and the cast reactions to it, but it felt like the sound mixing wasn't great, so it just kind of fell short. Like, without giving away too much, there's a time when there's some ghostly, like, knocking on a door, and the door's not moving, and it sounds like it's really far away, like it's not a loud knocking, but the characters both look really scared, and so I wasn't sure if you're supposed to think that someone's knocking on the door, or something's knocking on the door, or if it's like someone outside the house, or like what exactly was going on. And so it wasn't like all the elements were there working together to create the same effect, and so it didn't get that same feeling of suspense that you would have like in a lot of scenes in the Haunting of Hill House series, or even like Bird Box or something. Yeah, I definitely see what you're saying with that. It was when you have to rely on the acting to get the scare, it's just like it has to be pretty good. And in this situation, I don't think it necessarily was the best, and it was confusing. I mean, for me, it was confusing. You would hear, like you're saying, you would hear the knocking, and you're like, wait, is it just down the hall? Like, what's going on here? Anyway, I definitely agree with what you're saying. Yeah, and I feel like just kind of in general, they didn't really develop the most interesting parts of the story. Like, the premise was that the main guy was a paranormal investigator. He got Theo and Nell to come help because they had a history of paranormal experiences. But then there was no real additional character development after that, like you were talking about. And Luke never really played any significant part in the story either. Like, he was there for everything, but I feel like they could have done a lot more in filling in his background or have some twist, because he theoretically was like somehow related to the Cranes, maybe. But it just doesn't ever develop any of that. So that's not a spoiler, because it just doesn't even go into it. So, yeah. But anyway, all that said, who would you recommend this movie to, or who do you think would like it, if anyone? I think that people who enjoyed The Haunting of Hill House should watch this anyways, just to see like the how it evolved. Yeah, I agree. And if anything, might make you appreciate the TV show a little bit more if you didn't enjoy it. Yeah, I would say fans of that for sure. I mean, it's a well-known classic horror movie. Yeah. And so, I mean, it has good reviews on, the different sites like IMDb and all that. So it's definitely one of the classics. Now, I will say this: I don't feel like this is a Halloween horror movie. Oh, I agree completely. Like the month of October, like this,
for me, it wasn't. It was like, that's a Frankenstein, Dracula kind of thing. But anyway, that's my 2 cents. Who would you think?
No, I'm 100% with you on all of that. I think the one addition that I would have is just the part of the movie that worked for me was all of the scenes that inspired scenes in the series. And, obviously we'll go into more of that after the spoiler warning, but I really enjoyed that. As a fan of the series, I really enjoyed seeing a lot of, the way that they kind of took that source material and then ran with it and developed it. So I think it's worth seeing if you're a fan of the series, just because it's kind of more content in that same vein, but don't go into it expecting to be scared.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Let's play the warning and then get into the good parts.
Warning, warning, warning. Spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. This is your warning. Warning, warning, warning. Spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. This is your warning. If it's not obvious enough, warning, spoilers.
Okay, so in summary, this movie made me appreciate The Haunting of Hill House way more.
Yeah.
And there were so many ideas and concepts from this that the series took and made awesome that it just really, because what was here was not like a captivating presentation. What they did with it in The Haunting of Hill House, though, was amazing. And so seeing kind of the background of it or where it came from, I thought was really cool. Like going back and listening to a good band's like first self-released EP and seeing where they came from is interesting, if you're into that band, just to see kind of the progression over time. But
so here's a question I kind of have, though. Is it weird that people nowadays can basically rewrite a story from a long time ago and get as much credit as much accolades as they do? Am I making like?
Yeah,
it's almost like because you're copying the story and like it's from our understanding too. It's not even going to what the book does. It's like an interpretation of the book and the movie, and it's like I find that almost as much as I love that show and I'll watch that show multiple times, but it almost frustrates me because it's like, wait a second, like this isn't necessarily an original idea you had here, and I don't know. It was great writing, it was great filming, but I just felt like frustrated in a way. I don't know why. I don't know if it's because we're musicians and you definitely see the people who get famous off of songs that sound exactly like a song from the 60s or whatever, but I don't know if it's the case or what, but it just kind of frustrated me, I guess.
I kind of think of it more like, and I definitely see where you're coming from, but I think for me, like on the album Diamond Dogs by David Bowie, he has a couple songs in there that are about the novel 1984, and I really like those, and I think those are super cool. So it was kind of like art inspiring other art, but definitely it was presented in such a different way that it didn't feel like a copy or like a ripoff. It was almost like paying homage to it or something. So, but it is a different scenario with a movie or film because the story was really different in the series. So I don't know.
It was. It's just it was weird for me. Like, because it was just strange. I don't know. It was just like, it's crazy that that's acceptable to do. Like that's something, and because it's good, it's even more acceptable. Like you can just, and I'm glad that they did it because I thoroughly enjoyed that TV show, but it was weird for me.
So you think if they'd done a bad job that everybody would have just said they were trying to rip off the movie and that they were hacks and didn't know what they're doing? Yeah, that's probably a very valid point.
In the time period that we're living in now, for sure. But because they did it really well. Yeah. But who knows? Anyway.
And it's like the same thing with, what's that? Westworld. There was that 70s movie that I grew up watching and loved, and then they put out this series, and the series is just a whole different ballgame. I mean, it's completely a divergent story from what was there, but it's using a lot of that same motivation, kind of like The Haunting of Hill House. So I think you're exactly right in that when it's good, everybody thinks you're smart, but when it's bad, everyone thinks you're derivative. So
or like Chips. That's a good example of like, they remade a movie and it just flopped. I mean, it wasn't the greatest, and it was like, kind of making fun of them for it, but it's like, well, if they came out and it was a blockbuster, then it would have been, I don't know. I was just
fair enough. So all that said, what did you love or hate about the movie?
So I did like. There's a couple things. First off, I thought it was kind of progressive in a couple things. Mm-hmm. Like the hanging of the dead body. It just seemed like something that I didn't figure would be in a movie in the 60s, at the beginning of the movie. There were a couple shots that I really enjoyed. So when the caretaker of Abigail, when she dies, she falls down the stairs, and like the shot after that where it's like she's laying on her back and she's dead, but like I don't know, it's shot like low and kind of shows the stairs almost, but she's in the shot. I thought that was really good. I was like, actually, I mean, I like that angle, or that shot that you did there, and it also I also appreciated that it got right into it. Well, to an extent, like the way that the movie started was basically like explaining the house. So it explained Hugh, and it was just like the mom died.
Yeah. Well, that was something that was on my love list as well, was that they actually gave the history of the house over time and kind of built the backstory of the house, which I felt like they didn't do until more at the very end of the series. But even then, it was more about the characters in the house, kind of. Yeah. Well, which I guess this was a little bit too, but setting it up that way in a movie where you have a lot more limited time and establishing that there is something weird going on before it starts, I thought was a good move on their part. Yeah,
I mean, and it was also, the thing also for me, one of the big, if not the biggest thing about The Haunting of Hill House TV show was that it was the house that was, alive or haunted. I mean, the movie starts off and it just straight up says like it's an evil house and it's born bad. Yeah, it was just like, okay, well that's out.
There was no questioning it in the movie.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, well, if we had watched this damn movie, then we would have known. But I'm glad we did. Anyway, so I enjoyed that. Things that frustrated me, I think I've kind of already said. I thought Eleanor's character was too off the wall.
Yeah, I agree.
It didn't make too much sense. I did see where they were going with it, like that she was going to be the one that's losing it.
Yeah.
And, there were a couple scenes that I enjoyed. So I liked seeing the scenes that they did in Haunting of Hill House.
Yes.
Opposed to, the movie, even though I just got done complaining about, weird me out. But I definitely liked the doorknob. So you have the banging on the door, and Eleanor and Theo's in the room in the movie, and you see the doorknob turn.
Yes,
and it's like, oh god, okay, that's the special effects that we want.
Yeah,
we want to see things like that because that's gonna creep you out. Like that's creepy.
Yeah.
And it did that a couple times. So.
Yeah, that was my other love, was all of the scenes that were reimagined for the show. And that one I thought was so cool because even though in this story Theo and Eleanor have no relation to each other, they still were like in the bedroom together, experiencing that together. And that was like the thing that, turned into it in the series. So that I thought was really cool. And that was a really good moment of the show. And there are a few other scenes like that I'll talk about too. But yeah, those were definitely the parts of the movie I most enjoyed.
I think that, And so I think one of the things I didn't necessarily enjoy was it just seemed like these people were just in this house talking, almost like talking.
Yeah.
And you're supposed to be investigating, but it was just like, I don't know. It was just not. It just didn't make too much sense. Which, paranormal investigation now, we have like those TV shows like the Ghost Hunters or whatever. I mean, so like the people are just really giving it all they have for all this fake stuff. But like their investigation was basically like, we're gonna write a report after we leave. And make sure that I don't know. It's just. It's just like, well, I feel like you got enough after the first couple of days. Just go ahead and bail.
Yeah. But I felt like you could sum up this movie pretty well with the phrase missed opportunities. Because I felt like there was a lot of good setup, but just not the delivery. Because there were like no movement or ghosts in the background. There was nothing that was really like subtle or creepy. And it just felt super slow paced and mostly predictable. And in the end, when it has sort of the grand finale, I guess, that grand sequence of events in the ending, that was the only time that there was any real sense of like urgency or it's important that I pay attention right now.
Yeah.
And so the pacing of it I didn't like near so much. But yeah, like we said, there were some good scenes. One was when, you know, they were in the room together and they heard the banging, saw the doorknob turn. Another one was when they walk out into the hallway and they find that chalk writing on the wall that says, "Help Eleanor come home." And I thought that was cool, you know, because of the way that played out in the series. But then I felt like they just completely and totally underreacted to it.
Yeah.
Like they all saw it. That was like definitive evidence that there was something else in the house that could impact the physical world. And they were all there with the sole purpose of studying paranormal stuff. And then they have like clear evidence and they're all just like, well, would you look at that? Let's go back to the other room. Like it was
clean it up.
Yeah. It was so underwhelming.
Also, it's strange to have to touch something and taste it to figure out it's chalk.
Yeah.
Like, is that just me? Like, he tasted it. It's like, is that a thing that they used to do?
Oh, he was just hoping it was blow.
I guess so, man. I understand. But still, it was just like, what the heck? He tasted it. He goes, that's chalk.
Yeah.
What the hell?
My super scientific analysis tells me that. Yeah. Another scene I liked was at night when the doctor told Theo and Nell to stay in the same room, and Nell is awake and like hearing the voices and seeing the shadows, and she's telling Theo not to scream and that it'll be over soon, and then that she's like holding her too hard and that she's breaking her hand.
Squeezing her hand,
yeah, and then she yells and the lights come on. You see Theo's on the other side of the room, and Nell's like, "Whose hand was I holding?" You know, the fact that was one of my favorite scenes from the series. I was glad that was in the movie as well.
Yeah.
But then one other scene that I kind of wanted to ask you about that I thought was interesting was, and this is getting a little bit into the ending, but it's after the doctor's wife has come to stay, and then she stays in the nursery where Abigail Crane died, which is supposed to be kind of the epicenter of the haunting or whatever. And they go back and the doctor's wife is just gone. And then Nell goes off to look for her, but ends up in like a trance and is kind of walking through the downstairs of the house, and she's thinking, and things are kind of like weird with the camera, and she's saying, "I'm disappearing inch by inch into this house." And then she goes up to that statue of Hugh Crane and says, "We killed her, you and I, Hugh Crane." And then she starts like dancing, kind of like she did when she went back to the house in the series. But I was so confused by that, because you find out they definitely didn't kill her.
Yeah.
She had nothing to do with the wife disappearing. It was the house. And so I didn't know how to interpret that.
Yeah. I guess I'm in the same boat too, because it was like, well, like, I don't know. Yeah, I have no idea. Honestly, I can't really explain that, because it, like you said, she didn't die. She showed up at the end, but also, I mean, she showed up also after Nell was on the stairs. Yeah. But was that just I don't know. It didn't make too much sense with me either. Okay.
Yeah. So I didn't just miss something important.
No, I don't think so. I mean, if we did, we both did.
Yeah.
But I don't think so. It was just like, but you didn't. But then she started doing the dancing, and like I just immediately went back to the TV show thinking about that scene. Yeah. Which I was like, okay, that was a good scene. But
yeah, so I guess kind of the overall ending sequence is that happens, and then she's still kind of in her trance, and she goes up the stairs, and she's going towards the top, and you're thinking, like, she's about to jump off, because she's lost it at this point, and that's the way the house got the other person. But then the doctor chases her up there, and then, like, grabs her and pulls her back down, but as she had gotten to the top, she saw the doctor's wife through, like, a trapdoor or something, and then he pulls her back to the bottom and doesn't believe what she's saying. He sends her away because she's losing it, and then she's driving off, and then you're meant to think at least that the steering wheel is like turning it by itself, and then she sees the doctor's wife in the woods and swerves to avoid her and crashes into a tree and dies. Then I guess like the closing sequence is the other three, Luke and the doctor and Theo, are sort of standing around the wreck, and Luke says that she ran the car into the tree on purpose. The doctor says that she didn't believe in the supernatural, and the struggle to make sense of it all drove her insane. And then Theo says that she wanted to stay there, so she did it to herself. And I kind of think they're all right.
Well, yeah, actually, I could see that. I was kind of going with Theo's just because she was the one who could tell the feelings.
Yeah.
But yeah, I could definitely see that too. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that it was meant to be like a combination of the house was something she saw as like an escape. And so the house was sort of showing itself to her that way. And then she didn't want to leave, but she was convinced that the other... I don't think she wanted to believe that the house was evil. And so her mind just got kind of consumed, and yeah, it was weird.
Well, yeah, and maybe... I don't know, maybe it had something to do with because she was in the TV show, it was the mom who experienced the rocks, like it raining rocks. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But in this it was Eleanor, so maybe it was something like a magnet for that kind of stuff. I don't know.
Yeah,
I have no idea, but I think it. I mean, if any of them, it was for sure Theo's. She wanted to.
Yeah, she was the most tuned in. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Overall, the ending to me was just kind of confusing. It seemed like a theme of the movie.
Fast.
Yeah. The ending was finally interesting, and then it was over super quick. But it seemed like one of the themes was that the house wanted Nell, and she wanted to be there. But then for some reason, the doctor's wife got consumed by the house and took her place. But then Nell died, and the wife got to go free, or something. So again, the house was the most interesting thing in the movie. But after that very beginning part, they didn't really develop it or explore it all that much. They were just kind of hanging out while some low-key scary stuff was happening, and you didn't really get a lot of background or explanation, and you didn't hear any more about Theo's powers or how that had happened. You didn't hear any more about Nell's previous supernatural experience. It was just it had a lot of good ideas, obviously, because they sparked a really good TV show and came from a really successful book that a lot of people like. But I just felt like the delivery fell flat overall, and I don't think I'd recommend this to anybody that wasn't already a fan of the series.
Or maybe recommend it to someone who hasn't ever seen the series. So I would think maybe our opinion would be a little bit different.
And see if they like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
interesting.
Let's be honest. With the way that Netflix tells you how many viewers they have, I'm sure everyone in the world's watched it.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I mean, I think overall it was confusing, and like you said, I think there was a few missed opportunities, but I mean, it was definitely a good idea. And maybe if we, if I had read the book, it would have been more, I don't know. Yeah. Who knows?
Yeah.
Definitely like you said, I'm glad it sparked what it did, because the TV show did turn out great, even though it was, that was confusing to me. But yeah,
for sure,
it's just strange, a long, strange movie.
Yes, I think that if it had been shorter, it would have actually helped you stay more engaged.
I think so.
And if they would have sprinkled in just a little bit of, some movement in the background or anything just to keep you paying attention and sort of on edge, it could have come across much better than it was.
Yeah. And throw in a ghost.
Yeah. I was so waiting for it because there were so many of those mirrors in the background that were reflecting other mirrors. I was just waiting for, even if it was just a normal person that they showed,
right?
And then the characters turned around and they weren't there or something. It could have, it was frustrating.
It had a lot of opportunity, but,
Yeah.
That also explains why it didn't make as much as it was.
Yeah,
at the box office. But. Yeah.
Well, cool. I think we're done here, and next week we'll be back talking about one of your all-time favorites,
Harold and Kumar. Go to White Castle.
No, Guantanamo Bay.
Oh, okay. Which one are we doing next?
Killer Clowns.
Oh, forgot about that.
Yeah.
F&A, dude. Yes.
Yeah.
I can't wait. And let's just tell everyone now, if you take that movie serious, then you're an idiot.
Yeah. Just sit back, make some popcorn, and enjoy it. And then join us next week.
I hope you guys get snowed in. You can eat some popcorn and watch that movie. That's what I hope for you guys. All right. Love you all. Talk to you later.
Miss you. And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com, or feel free to comment on or message our Facebook page. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening.
Yeah. Reminds me of the scene in Almost Heroes where they see Chris Farley smelling like cow shit, and they're a mile away or whatever, and they're like, "You can tell that from smelling the shit." He goes, "No, I can see them. They're right there." And they're like, "Why are you smelling?" And then they look, and he's just smiling real big, smelling it. It's just like creepy. Anyway. Yeah.